DEGRASSI is a Canadian television franchise comprised of 5 series and 4 movies following the lives of young people living on and around a fictionalized version of an average suburban community. Going well back over 40 years, the incarnation that's most likely familiar to you, 2001's DEGRASSI The Next Generation, is arguably the dominant heel of the cultural footprint. For nearly 15 years, these wild and crazy Canucks were encouraged, no, empowered, to tell the most dramatic-ass stories that could ever come out of a quaint Canadian high school in the most sincere way possible. It goes there, all the time, but it doesn't really lose its impact. If not for the mimetic value of knowing Drake got shot, the shooting itself would still hold a significant slot within the decade's cultural zeitgeist. On its own, it's a uniquely impactful chapter of series history. Outside looking in, it'd be easy to assume that this is the most tragic, emotionally charged segment out of the entire franchise. And up until right around this point right here, I would be inclined to agree with you. But apparently, somebody else had other ideas.
As traumatic as it was to see Jimmy get shot, viewers could take solace in the fact that he survived. The same cannot be said for JT, who died from a stab wound suffered in the Season 6 episode Rock This Town.
This video flipped my entire meager understanding of this series on its head. They not only deemed this development sole survivor not once, not twice, but 3 times in 3 separate videos. In the 23 years this series has existed in the ether, I don't think I've ever seen or heard of this character in my fucking life. I'm not saying I gave him the purplet in my mind. I'm not saying that. I've just never been privy to his existence. I certainly remember other characters from this clique, just not him. Every instance of this character being mentioned is him being venerated for some sassy sitcom-style quip he made in Season 1, maybe early Season 2, if they're a real trooper. His role in informing half the fandom's OTP or being mourned for his eventual death. It's suffocating. You're telling me that this presumed mediocre white boy was actually the Krabby Patty secret formula of tragic DEGRASSI storytelling? It's not the numerous essays that occurred, nor the various points of fallout following the shooting, or the rampant child abuse, or the kid that took his own life in the fucking bathroom, the other kid that took his life in the greenhouse. It wasn't even like one of the original DEGRASSI Junior High kids going out to kill a baby in a drunk driving accident only a couple years after his own parents got killed in the exact same way.
Criminal negligence causing death. Criminal negligence causing injury times 2. And drunk driving.
It's not even one of the kids' dementia-addled fathers running over the dog because they forgot it was no. The joystick is a metaphor for penis. This is so stupid. What gets me about JT is that he is largely responsible for creating the unofficial schism between classic and modern DEGRASSI. It's hard to sell the merits of seasons 8 through 14 to an original viewer depending on how hard they cried during his final moments. I'd be hard-pressed to write him off entirely, but the lofty praise and wider admiration of his character without any clear and present justification beyond that death gives me pause. I'm definitely at a bit of an impasse here, and honestly, I was just kind of invested in figuring this out. Trust me, I know this was a stupid thing to work on, but if I didn't dig into this rabbit hole, you would never know that this kid directly died because he thought his dick was trash. That is a true story. True story. I don't even know why you think I would make something up like that. It's all true. The deeper I dug, the more sympathetic I became. No joke. This clown house is a real character arc, and he arguably didn't get enough credit for it.
Hey, Liberty girlfriend.
As the subtitle might suggest, DEGRASSI The Next Generation was predicated on the idea of following a new crop of kids within the same timeline of events. A couple years before its premiere, previous DEGRASSI producers realized that if followed in real time, the child of iconic Degrassi Junior High character Spike Nelson would likely be walking down the same halls in junior high by the turn of the century. In the process of forming the central dynamics of the show, a core quartet was formed. Functionally, this kid and her 3 friends are the anchor point for which every Degrassi story is built off. Though they're part of the younger graduating class, the lower-key nature of conflict between the 12-year-olds was the starting and often returning point for these narratives. In Povenmire parlance, they're the setting, rather than the focal point. That doesn't mean we don't get to see these 4 struggle. The pilot swiftly vacillates between a quaint reunion night for the original Degrassi kids and a storyline involving Emma almost being skinned alive by an online predator.
And when this comes back, keep it downstairs. Keep the cyberstalkers out of her room.
Admittedly, I would say the girls go through a whole other level of shit compared to either of the boys, which stacks up if you consider what the probable target audience would be here. The difference in tone, pacing, and fervor of development is almost split on gendered boundaries. Conventional wisdom would suggest they're missing out here, but this format does well to play to JT's strengths. Even in more dramatic moments, he's definitely working well enough in short bursts. For most characters in this series, there was that one scene that places them firmly in good noodle territory. JT's was when he confronts Paige's rapist in the middle of a basketball game. Up to that point, they had cultivated an unlikely friendship off the back of the former vapidly attempting to court the queen bee of their cast. The age gap is not as huge, but it's almost giving Zach Martin trying to get with Maddie Fitzpatrick. This womanizer angle for JT wasn't the most unbelievable direction they could have taken, but for a while it stood to be another trait that exists solely for comedic value. In the long run, considering how he's characterized once he becomes more familiar to her circle of friends, this angle did work well to reinforce his crippling desire to be liked. Not idolized or envied, just appreciated, I think.
This is it! This is it! Yo, dog, these fries are wicky whack.
One would perhaps assume that if told through the boy's perspective, you wouldn't be getting much more out of it than you would get from your average kidcom. I get the stink of Ned's declassless off this kid's ideas at points, and it's not far-fetched to assume that his inner monologue would follow in step with one of Nickelodeon's greats. In reality, there's a decent level of mystery to certain aspects of his life, obscuring that broader, goofy goober-ass archetype, compounded by the fact that we're only allowed a peek behind the curtain when situationally convenient. In terms of raw storytelling potential, JT doesn't break any glass ceilings. The majority of his longer-running storylines involve his chaotic romantic endeavors, with his own personal development taking a backseat. I deadass learned more about him as a character by watching him coddle guinea pigs than as a beleaguered teenage father connecting with his calling. Certain personality flaws stay consistent throughout the 6-season run, but at vanishingly slim moments, there's a bit more nuance there to contextualize the various fuck-ups and fumbles therein. More commonly, fans tend to complain about the decline of JT and Toby's bromance when reappraising seasons 3 and 4. There's a handful of moments where the former refuses to take his best friend seriously once he sensed he could finally climb the social ladder. Even in situations not directly related to popularity, he's very objectively a dick to Toby. Shout out to that time when he taunts the dead school shooter kid, the one actual friend that Toby had made in that period of time where he just fucked off to hang out with the popular kids.
So what do you want me to say? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you became friends with a psycho. You knew what Rick was like.
I didn't know he was gonna bring a gun to school.
Really.
Pretty hard to watch. Understandably, this has led to a collective memory hole, where at any time Toby needled JT is completely obscured. Nobody remembers anything about it.
You gave her my photo album?
These aren't equivalent circumstances, of course, but I don't think it would be far-fetched to argue that these two had a pretty normal friendship, and continue to even later on, even if it wasn't as fun to watch. I think a lot of the sentimentality of Degrassi comes from that nation feeling of drifting around, trying to find your place in the world. At its core, you can reduce a lot of the conflicts down to that desire for identity. It's a struggle that most, if not all, kids go through. So it's one that will stick. It's timeless. It seems to me that JT's story is built around outgrowing people, drifting further apart or closer together, trying to find that balance in distance. This is clearly someone who is not blind to the world, but just does not really see their place in the world is. They're a cog, they just don't know where they fit in the system. And it does drive a lot of his actions later down the line. You notice there is just that very primal need, that hunger to be liked. The man he just wants to be liked. It gets kind of confusing to see because perhaps his arc is not as overt as other characters, but it finds ways to be compelling. Like, I think I brought up the locker episode already. That one's a great example, right? Where the two boys, they gotta end up sharing a single locker, and JT is obviously a fucking slob, and Toby just can't stand it. The former is cognizant of his role in this situation. He doesn't give a fuck about his own mess, but he would rather keep his friend on board. And he expresses this overtly.
And while some would say that clean freaks like yourself are totally annoying, you're my friend and I plan to keep it that way.
Just to, like, be petty and mess it up. Like, he's selfish, you know? He's a little asshole, as were most of us. It's a very understandable tete-a-tete. Like, you can play it off as comedy, but this is part of his struggle for balance, you see? In some way, you could definitely argue that Tobes is ultimately responsible for his friend's death. Yeah, the nigga is dead. The advent of the death itself is rather elusive. It was set up about as well as less than 3 episodes of build-up can allow. And despite how much it's been debated, nobody truly knew why the writers decided to go down this path. As far as I can tell, it wasn't until 2021 where we got a detailed answer as to what happened. Alright, that's cool with me. I mean, I don't mind things like this. It's just, they have to be written well, you know? Surely you can make even abrupt, gratuitous violence feel gripping and emotionally compelling without being manipulative, right? Genuinely, I respect the original vision, but the final product could have been executed a lot better, especially for a character whose arc up to that point had reached a noticeable peak. In the context of the story, you could argue that the kid was almost being punished for completing his character development. On paper, the story of JT Yorke is pretty disjointed, but I did notice several external factors that affected the meta text of the show and the reading of his character. I think the show itself does a middling job at spawning JT stands, but fortunately, the unintentional accoutrements involved do carry here. I don't think it's hard to understand why he had way more shooters than Liberty. Lanky clown ass with a disgusting amount of puka shells that simultaneously becomes corked up and fucked up by the surprise pregnancy arc is a given. I mean, who wouldn't? I didn't understand the underdog angle at first, but it definitely takes on more definition in later seasons. Like, Liberty is very much a bigger part of that tapestry beyond being a love interest. Retroactive cooties aside, she got to him so badly because she often held up a mirror to his flaws and insecurities through her affections. When she challenged him, he had nowhere to hide emotionally, and he just didn't want to deal with that. They only became a thing once he became accepting of her buckling against the status quo, and in turn, the course of change in his own life.
My stomach hurts a little.
I have to assume that's why everyone copped to that ship. The thing with Manny was very fly-by-night, and I think Mia was helpful considering what stage he was in, but she didn't lead him anywhere new. Except perhaps an early grave. But you know what? I think Mia's slander is overrated as fuck. That girl didn't do shit to him in season 6. She wasn't even there, bro. What? Can I just say, I truly am captivated by the accent. I don't know what it is. I think, I've watched a lot of old as fuck Canadian cartoons. That accent was like a staple. When being you meant something, when they had to establish themselves as a country, the accent was part of the deal. You don't really get that anymore. It made me kind of nostalgic. So I'm like, well, Stacy from Columbus, Ohio, I mean, she was probably onto something back in the day. That's all I'm saying. I see JT as a character built off a static memory. His most basic traits were retained over time, but the farther you get away from his template, the more difficult it is to understand how people latch onto the idea of him. Mans looked at a clown wig and unironically saw possibilities. He's desperate for love. This is a cry for help. And y'all didn't give it to him. Objectively, this character was played to better in his younger form. Compensating for the stylings of his actor, I reckon it would have been a challenge to get off a lot of complex shit. Like, Craig Manning could carry the drug dealer story. I don't know if JT Yorke could carry the coked-up rockstar arc. As it turns out, this character was basically terraformed from nothing. And I think it worked out pretty well, but it also explains a lot. I mean, does kind of explain a lot. Alright. Listen, I didn't think it would be fair for me to get up here and just shit on this kid's acting, or like a decade's worth of it, because it really isn't that bad. Like, I don't want to over-exaggerate here. To me, I found that the character being constructed in the way that he was obscured what growth would be there. Let me put it like this, right? JT is obviously not like a clown. Like, as far as humorous characters go, he's like a sarcastic mime. He's smoking in the corner of the room. He's giving like color commentary off to the side. I think in some way that the fandom's perception of him as a humorous character, it has more in common with his perception of himself rather than the actual picture. The strength of this character is built off the back of his actor and like his natural mannerisms and shit. And in all the media that I had seen him in, I don't think much changed fundamentally about his performance. He's understated, but there's also like a bit of something else breaking through. Like, I don't hate this choice. The only time when I found myself irritated was when it was any time where they had to make this nigga try to cry. It just was not working for me. Who the fuck told this kid that he could cry on cue? He can't. It ain't working. Who the fuck said this? Like, it's not working. Stop it. He just making funny faces in the mirror. What? I find it funny too, particularly because when the N did their podcasts with each member of the cast, they did 2 of them with this dude, particularly after JT's stabbing got aired, and half the conversations would be about his time in college just studying the theatrical experience. Like, he seemed like he was really going hard in the paint. Like, this was what he was born to do for the next, like, 7-8 decades of his life or whatever. And that didn't happen.
Yeah, we did, we'll do like 6 or 7 productions in a school year, which is a lot. Oh, and wow. So we're in rehearsals all the time, on top of my other subjects. Like, I do history as well and political science.
Right.
Oh, wow.
School.
Yeah.
So, pretty busy.
I think I would stand on business, though, about that Craig comment. Ryan did a good job, I would say. But he had a very specific experience lumped into his character. I really don't see us getting another Craig Manning out of that. Off camera, it also seems like Gibberty has incidentally strong organic roots. That's what we love to fucking see. This promo speaks 1,000 words, I tell ya what.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Do you guys have any snacks?
Maybe after the segment, Nina. You're watching every DEGRASSI episode to get you caught up for the new season.
I'm so hungry.
I can't believe the fucking pop-out did all this to me. Look at this shit. It's a 13-page document. It's not even done. Disgusting. Let me try to bring this whole thing home, because as far as I clunkily remember, I may or may not have had a thesis to try and prove, and I have yet to do it. Like I said earlier, DEGRASSI is very much predicated on portraying the very real and dramatic ups and downs of teenagehood. The whole point of the shit was to showcase them realistically. And of course, the series peaked when it hit its most dramatic moments. And you can't take away the cultural significance of those moments. I was binge watching fucking Backyardigans when all this shit was going down. So I have no connection to this at all. But I'm still talking about it 20 years after the fact. Obviously, these more dramatic situations were pulling in a fuck ton of viewers, even as far back as season 2 when Craig was introduced. So they kind of kept pulling that. But at the end of the day, you still needed a strong anchor point to keep the ship upright. If you're stuck at port and your vessel gets battered by 500 storms, you're still grounded. You can still get to safety. If the anchor isn't planted, even a light breeze can fuck you up for life. And out of anyone in that original quartet, JT was the best equipped to be that anchor point. The 2 girls had they were trapped in 91 different storylines and shit. Toby, they had just completely sidelined. I think it's a terrible injustice. They absolutely need to do more with him. But JT had a pretty straightforward story in comparison. Compared to the rest of his peers, he arguably had less scandal and intrigue to him, and you could tell that he had really changed as a person. So taking away this very organic anchor point for the audience for emotionally guided reasons, that hurt. Going into this, like, I wasn't even really sure where this split came from. Like, it seemed arbitrary to me, because really up until like season 10, it's still the same show, even if the same iconic characters are not there in full force. But by the end of it, it's like, okay, this was kind of problematic in and of itself. Just taking this character out the way that you did. I don't think it was worth it for the extra year or two of melodrama that you milked out of this. He deserved better, and so did the rest of his fans. This is a travesty. Most importantly, it robbed us of an opportunity to really dig into who he is. That is all that JT really wanted. He wanted to be understood, and he wanted to be liked. And this whole, like, bullshit, like, 2.5 minute arc that they set up with Lakehurst, it just entirely robs us of getting to internalize that. He wanted to be known as, like, as a decent father. He was kind of a shitty friend here and there, but he respected loyalty. He respected value. He did see the unique qualities in people, even in situations where, frankly, he would not be expected to. I'm not sure if it really was as simple as him just learning to apply himself. But I think that he had a lot to give, and there was a lot of wisdom hiding there underneath his fucking giant baseball cap. He was a real person. He was a real person, part of this huge facet of experience of human growth and connection. And the way that they brought this to a close, it's not very DEGRASSI. In order to go there, you have to start from somewhere different. And I think that all started somewhere right here.
Manny, Emma, this is Toby. We were at camp together. No, really?
You promise you won't forget me?
How could I forget the great JT Yorke?
Okay. Well, I gotta go. See you in your dreams.
You know it.
No, I love you.